Hey, if you're new with us today or you've never been a part of this, what we're talking about today, you think, what is Story Sunday and what are you talking about, Pastor Jim? Several months or years ago, a couple of years ago, I think we started doing this, and it just came to me through a study I was doing, the strong importance of recognizing the story and the journey that we have with God. Every one of you has a story of your life being lived out, and hopefully and prayerfully, every one of us has a story that includes Jesus in that story. And maybe that's a new journey for you, or it's been a lifelong journey, or it's a journey you're exploring and wondering about, and you're here today to kind of check that out. You're wondering what it's like. In all of those cases, we all have a story with Jesus, of how our life has been impacted when our lives were intersected with him. And so, several years ago, or a couple years ago, we started doing this, where we take this time, this service time, or the sermon time, where I would naturally preach, and we take the time to hear the stories and the lives and the testimonies of some people that have been journeying with Jesus. And we've heard all kinds of walks and lives, men and women, all different stories, all different journeys. And last spring, around Mother's Day, we had 3 ladies who came. If I get this right, we had Janine, and we had Patty, and we had Cheryl, who came and they shared their stories here in these chairs. And they just talked about how Jesus intersects their lives, and because of that intersection, how he impacts their lives. And so we tried to do the guys in a couple months later, and it just didn't work out. There were some scheduling difficulties. Some of the guys weren't available. And so thinking about this fall, and we hadn't had Story Sunday in a while, I really hope that it blesses you. I hope it encourages you. I hope you learn more about your church family. And I hope you hear through the stories of these 3 men we're going to hear from today, their testimony and how Jesus has impacted their lives, and they get to praise him and thank him for that. So I'm going to invite Darren and Doran and Nick to come, and they'll sit at their appropriate spots based on their snack choice. And I always just like to give them, whoever does this, I'd like to give them a little thank you, whether it's candy or it's an Oregon Ducks hat or something else, and just to say thank you for serving us and for being a part of this service today. They are willing to make themselves vulnerable. They're willing to talk about their life and what they do with Jesus, and so we encourage that, and we're thankful for that. And so today, you're going to hear their story. That's what we're doing for church today, and I hope you're blessed by that this morning. So settle in and listen, and Mark will tune everybody in and get to know everybody. So thank you, guys. Thank you. These men are integral parts of our church. They are, at least 2 of them are grandpas. All 3 of them are dads. It's not Nick. All 3 of them are dads, and all 3 of them are husbands, and I think, if I'm right, all 3 of them are brothers, and they're sons, and so we're excited to hear about their journey. So I'm just going to begin, and I send questions ahead of time to these guys and say, hey, this is what we're going to talk about. If you have any issues with any of those questions, we'll talk about it. And I always insert a little disclaimer that I have fair game to ask them something that's not on the notes that might pop up in my head as we go along. So you never know what they might share that might prompt a follow-up question. So today, we want to hear a little bit about you. So we'll just start with Doran and kind of go down the line. Tell us a little about you. Tell us your name, because not everybody may know you. How long you've been married, how many kids, and you can include grandkids you have, and what do you do for work? What's your favorite hobby?
Well, I've been married for 32 years. I have 5 children and 9 grandchildren.
Wow.
I work at Power Motion as an outside salesman. My hobbies are cooking and making pepper mixture.
Hot as you can make it, yep. Good. Thanks, Doran. Nick?
Nick Ward. Second question?
Yeah, that's one of the questions. Who you are,
Okay,
yep.
okay. Make sure we're on the same page. Been married 13 years, 15 total, 2 kids. I work for the Sheriff's Department, K-9 handler, and I chase bad guys for my... No,
That's your hobby?
Yeah, I chase hobby. Yeah, that's my hobby. No, duck hunt, and I like to fish and
Cool.
hang out with the kids.
Outdoorsy stuff. Good. Darren?
I had the blessing of having Nick come to my house here not too long ago, and one of his coworkers looked at me and he goes, "Yeah, Nick says that he knows you." Because I figured that's either really good or really bad. My name's Darren Damon. Excuse me. I am 50 years old. I own Power Motion. I get to work with Doran, and I have 6 kids. And my hobby, as you heard during Trick or Treat, is now classic cars. So
Yes, 2.
68 Mustangs.
All right. So we'll go back down the line here. Tell us about your wives. Tell us where you met your wife and what drew you to her. A little more personal about this. Settle in,
Well,
ladies.
everybody really wants to know where I met my wife. I'm sure. Actually, I met my wife at a friend of mine's house. I was riding a 10-speed, believe it or not, because I did some things that I wasn't too proud of, and I got my driver's license taken away.
Oh, we learn something new every day, don't we?
So I was riding my 10-speed over to my buddy's house, and he had a couple of gals over there, his girlfriend and one of her friends, and happened to be my wife. And I pull up, and I'm talking to her, and we just kind of got together, and ever since then, it was kind of a little corny story about it. I was the cheese, and she was the mouse, and she had to find me. Needless to say, I forgot that she gave me a ride home.
Oh, okay.
So she had no problem finding me.
That's true. Very good. Cheryl's not here today. She's been really sick all week, so hopefully she's tuning in on Facebook. She's there. Hi, Cheryl. And she's tuned in. So, Nick, tell us about your wife.
It's kind of a long story, so I'll try to pare it down as best I can. So, prior to meeting Janine, like most people, I wasn't right with God. I wasn't, I wasn't the person I wanted to be. So I humbled myself. I broke down. It was a prayer, but it was put into a letter. Like, hey, this is the kind of person that I'm looking for. And I try to be specific, but I don't want to challenge God. And I don't know how else to say that, because there's a lot of stuff that I left out. I didn't challenge God. And then there was a handful of, hey, obviously I'm not right, so I need to do this, that, and the other thing. And I had a list of about 10 things. Hey, I want to do this. I packed that letter up and I put it away, and I met Janine the next month.
Wow.
Okay, but then again, I didn't think anything of it. We started dating. I go to Iraq, and once I'm in Iraq, I've already proposed to her. We're already engaged. We're gonna get married as soon as we come back. I find this stupid letter that I'd packed away in this notebook that just happened to come to Iraq with me, and I got to reading it, and I was like, oh. Oh, I didn't even put that one in there, but that's still there. So there was just a lot of stuff in there. And so that's kind of mine. I always tell everybody, my wife is my greatest blessing. Yeah, I know.
That's good. Good job, Nick.
Yeah, I met my wife. Actually, we had mutual friends, and she came down to go water skiing with me and a buddy down in Kennewick over boat race weekend. That would have been in July. Then I broke up with my live-in girlfriend, and she moved out, and I needed a roommate, and Karen had just moved up from California and was living with some friends, and she needed a room, so in and I'll stop right there. Let's just say that we've been madly in love ever since.
Leave it there, huh? You know what? I just want to pause for a second. You know what's cool about these things is that, and especially probably this next question, is I think it's great that your children are here. Because these guys, or these kids, these daughters, especially your daughters, but also the sons that are in the room, and maybe some daughter-in-laws, get to hear their dads talk about their moms in the ways that we're talking about them. I think that's a pretty cool thing. So what's one thing that you really admire about your wife?
Well, the best thing that I admire about my wife is how honest she is. She loves totally with her heart. And she is driven by her heart, and she always puts other people first. She has no way in, I would have to say, on this earth that she doesn't take her kids first over anything, including me. And I'm good with that, because I admire that, because it gives her the ability to allow them to see her grow, and she gets to see them grow.
Good. Nick?
Janine's probably the sweetest person I know. And my personality, just the way I am, and it's right, wrong, or indifferent. If there's lack of leadership, I will take over and you will follow, and that's just how it is. So for the most part, that's okay. Mm-hmm. But when she's had enough, that's the end of it. And I can't even argue. It's just because she doesn't do it very often. So mm-hmm. she's able to still have that kind heart, but I've had enough. Mm-hmm. We're not doing this anymore. And that's exactly what I needed. I need somebody that would keep me checks and balances. So
good. Very cool. Darren?
I'd have to say my wife's stubbornness. No matter how difficult, no matter how hard, she feels a conviction, she follows it through. You're not going to sway her or change her mind. She won't beat you up over it, but she won't deviate from what she knows is right.
That's cool. Good for you gals to hear those things. And you too, Cheryl. So if you had a dream or a prayer for you have for your wife or you both as a couple, what might that be?
Well, my big dream is another 32 years to be married to a wonderful wife that
That's
takes
cool.
care of me. But truly, just a God-blessed marriage.
Okay.
Ditto?
You okay?
Can't really improve on that. I mean, it's been 15 years, and it's not always been easy, but it hasn't been hard.
That's cool.
Being self-employed, I've had to work a lot of hours and devote a lot of time and energy, and I guess my dream would be that we could have more, not only time as husband and wife, but travel and enjoy the kids, do a little more of that we haven't been able to do up to this point.
Sure. So speaking of kids, did you always want children? Was it easy to make that decision to say, okay, let's have kids? And what was your favorite, has been, or maybe you're in it, your favorite time raising your kids?
Well, everybody's looking at me kind of funny. Yeah, I've always wanted kids, and if I had it my way, I would have probably had 20 kids. But God put a stop to that. He said, "You've got enough." And I said, "Okay, I'm satisfied." But I wouldn't change it for the world. I just love my kids like I love their mom.
Good.
Question one more time, make sure I get the first part.
Did you always want children? Was it easy to make that decision to go and say, okay, Janine, let's start having kids? Or and what was your favorite time? Maybe it's raising them now, or when they were babies, or you're anticipating
Not babies, no.
the leap
I
over the
love you guys
teenage
to
years?
death, but the baby thing was not my phase.
I think I remember Janine saying something about that.
The children part was an easy decision. I think some of the, I think now, watching Sydney grow up to be the turd. Just the character that she shows, her love for God. It's quite the blessing. Watching my son go out there and mix it up in sports and just chip off the old block type of thing. But yeah, I mean, I'd say this is the phase that I like. I mean, of course, we'll go through the teenage years and everything else, but right now it's pretty good.
Good.
Pretty good to watch.
Good.
I grew up with just one brother, and I always kind of envisioned, I'll have one or two kids. And God said, you're going to have a few more. And I don't know. I wouldn't change a thing. It's been a journey. I don't know how many of you have been through adoptions. It's definitely full of labor pains, but there's such a blessing. My favorite age, I've loved every stage of life, from the infant where you get to cradle a little baby and look into their eyes and they look into yours, to toddlers. When your kids come to work with you and you get to work with them every day. Even this stage of life, I thoroughly enjoy every bit of it.
That's awesome. Very good. So, as a man, what is your biggest fear, and how does God help you with that? And what do you do with him? What do you need from him when you have that fear? What does he tell you? So, what's your biggest fear, and how does he help you with that? And what do you need from him when that fear rears its ugly head or is prevalent in your life?
Well, this was one that I was really struggling with. My biggest fear is not being able to provide for my family. And a lot of times when you go through situations and job changes and everything else, and there's all the uncertainties, and you try to finally settle down and you try to understand what God's really telling you, is I got this under control. You just have to walk through it with me. And there was some steps that kind of made some confirmations and stuff like that, that I seen after the fact, and I wasn't ready to accept the fact that God had it under control. And what finally made me realize it is a sense of secureness, that God is in control no matter what. He's got it.
Good.
I guess the greatest fear for me, as a parent, is not being able to fight those battles as your kids get older. The bullies, the heartaches, just not being able to. I'm a fixer. I mean, that's what I do for a living. I go to a house and put a Band-Aid on it, and I try to make it better. And you can't do that for every facet of life because you got to let the kids do their own thing. So it's just having the trust and belief that you've done your job, God will take the rest, and you just keep on carrying on.
Okay.
This was a challenging question for me. I'd have to say my biggest fear is failure. But my Christian faith has helped me a lot with that especially the last 10 years. I can only do what I can do. God's given me my gifts and talents and abilities, opportunities. But that's where my limitations end, but that's where God kicks in and He controls the outcome. And when you know God and trust God, then that outcome doesn't look so scary. You're not quite as afraid of what failure would look like because you know God has something at that point.
Sure. Yeah. So in those moments when you need to connect with God, we all need to all the time. We all want to, but in some of these more critical moments, how do you connect with Him the best? What's your favorite go-to thing that you go, God, this is how you and I really find your presence in my life in this way? Just for example, maybe it's scripture reading, maybe it's worship music, maybe it's quiet time. And it could be any of those or something else. Or do you have a favorite go-to Bible verse or book of the Bible you read, or is it something else? How do you really find yourself connected with God when you need Him the most?
Well, I got a couple of ways that I do it. I find myself relying on my accountability group, and I also pray. But I also refer to the Bible, and I refer to one particular verse. It's 1 Peter, verse 7 through 9. It says, "These have come so that the proven genuineness of your faith is greater worth than gold, which perishes even through the refined fire, may result in praise and glory and honor when Jesus Christ is revealed. Through you, though you have not even seen Him, you love Him. Even though you do not see Him now, you believe in Him, and you are filled with the inexpressible and glorious joy. For you are receiving the end result of your faith, the salvation of your souls."
That's a cool verse. Deal.
I know this is going to come as a surprise for a lot of you guys, but probably music.
Music.
Yeah. But no, it is. I mean, that's my go-to, and obviously prayer in the quiet times. I guess my go-to verse would be 2 Corinthians, "Love is patient, love is kind, does not envy, does not boast, it's not rude, it's not self-seeking." I remember my mom had it in the restroom, in the one that I use all the time. So I'd see that verse all the time. Every time you'd be in there, see it off the mirror. You just couldn't get it. You just couldn't get away from it. And the kind of a revelation came to me. I mean, I think that's God's introduction to us. So if you replace love with God, God is patient, God is kind. It's not easily angry, He's quick to forgive. Love never fails, God never fails. So it's kind of mine.
Good.
I think my favorite way is devotions. It's just amazing to me how I can sit and read 3 or 4 different devotionals, and there's a common theme through all of them, a common verse. God just speaks to me. And then from there it takes off into the Bible, and you just kind of hear it throughout your whole day. You'll be living that moment. Reconfirms what God is saying to you all the time.
Cool. One of the things I love and admire about these guys is that all 3 of them serve our church in various ways. Doran is really, really active and actively involved in our men's ministries, whether he's leading Wednesday morning down there sometimes filling in. He'll even fill in sometimes for Sunday school. He leads our ushers here and kind of makes sure that all the ushering happens here. Just an active part. And if you drink coffee on Sunday mornings, likely it's because Doran made it and got here early for you so you could have your coffee. And that's just one of the simple things that he does to serve our church in a variety of ways for work days and things he's here. Nick is one of our church board members and also obviously is part of the worship team and leads worship from time to time. And then Darren was church board secretary when I was hired here. And then he teaches Sunday school, Wednesday morning Bible study, an accountability group during the week, and then Friday night he and Karen co-host a marriage study, a small group at their home. And then just in another variety of ways, he's actively involved in the church. So I really appreciate the involvement that these men have in leading their church and in actively being involved in their church. But beyond all that, what's one way you would like to see God use you, or you'd like to let God use you? Maybe it's a unique way, or what's your favorite way to serve him?
Well, he tells me where I need to go, and he tells me what I need to do. Most of the time, it's I could be sitting in the back of the church or something like that, and somebody needs to be prayed for. And I'm sitting back there, and believe it or not, I sit back there and I fight myself because are you sure? This is not me, this is you? You know, and God says a lot of times, in fact, on this very screen right up here, it says, get up and do it. And I had to pray for somebody. And that's one of the things that I allow myself to do is just get up and do it, because that's what he's asking me to do. If he asks me to give somebody a ride, I'll give them a ride. If he asks me to take them home, I'll take them home. Whatever he asks. They're hungry. Feed them.
Good.
I'd say having those moments at work, being able to share faith or give an encouragement. A lot of times I'm going to somebody's worst day, right? Like somebody got call the cops, and that's usually their worst day. It doesn't mean they're a bad person. Just that day they've made bad decisions, right? So being able to have a job where I can show grace. No, you're not going to go to jail today, but here's what needs to happen, or something along those lines, or just being able to, just be able to be put into positions where I can show God's light. Mm-hmm. Even if that's just a handshake or an encouraging word, that's definitely my calling. Not being able to chase bad guys, like I said earlier. It is fun, I'm not gonna lie. But the greatest joy is just having a job where I can make such an impact on somebody where you don't necessarily think of God first in those situations.
Yeah, that's got to be hard. Darren.
Well, I really enjoy all the way God's using me and serving my church family and my family. And I guess if I had a goal, it would be a coffee ministry that would come in next.
No surprise there, is it?
I'll come work with Amanda.
Yeah, you and Amanda at Starbucks. All right. Well, I think you'd have quite at least a regular crowd that would service you. So, all the things that they share about life isn't always easy. And so I wanted to ask the guys, what's been the hardest thing you've had to go through as a dad or a grandpa, or maybe one of the hardest things? And what does God say to you in those tough moments?
Well, one of the hardest things I had to go through as a dad or a grandpa, basically, is watching 4 daughters get married and having to let them go and let them grow and let them be on their own with somebody else that's going to be there to provide for them or protect them and take care of them like I did. But the most important thing was to make sure that they were loved as much as they were loved when they were home. And that was really tough because, sometimes we might not be on the same page, but yet your kids are here and you're up there. You've already been through it. You know what you're going through. And sometimes I wouldn't change it for a world. I'm glad they're married to the people they're married to. They are successful and they are loved and cared for. And I just appreciate the guys that have joined my family more than anything.
That's cool.
I think the hardest thing was getting laid off in, I think it was '09. All my life I've been the provider, or contributing member anyways. And not having a job, not having a purpose, not to be able to provide financially was humbling, to say the least. And Jeannie can contest, I was pretty crotchety. Very, very sensitive about that. And, where's the finances going to come from? How am I going to be able to get them to whatever, do whatever, be able to just feed them? Just, again, God was faithful, and he provided. And, I got a job. It wasn't the one I wanted, but that's okay, because he put me in a position where this is where I want you right now.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I was humbled, and I think you need those moments in life where no, you're not in charge, but you like to think you are, but you're not. So that was probably one of the hardest ones. And I think every time you see your kids get sick is always devastating when you can't help them, and they're just miserable.
Yeah.
I think the hardest thing for me has been watching, especially one of your children make a mistake or have some consequences imposed on them, and having to allow them to walk through that. But then you get to see God come in. God's reinforced to me that no matter how much I love my children and what great things I want for my children, God loves them more. And to see God work in an area where I couldn't or had to keep my hands off has been just amazing. I've got to experience that a few times.
Yeah. Good. So we heard earlier that these guys have been married 30-some years, 15 years, and I can't remember, 32, 15, and 28. Okay, so there's a good number of years that they've spent together with their wives. And I would imagine if I asked them, as I ask some of you all the time, were there moments in your marriage where you would say, yeah, it would be easier if I was single? And every hand goes up. Sure, it'd be easier if I was single. I'm not asking them that question. However, I would wonder, what about those tough times in your marriage? I mean, sure, you kind of all alluded to your kids and providing for your families, and that's fine, and that's important. That's the things that guys talk about. But in your marriage, when it's just you and Janine, or it's just you and Cheryl, or it's just you and Karen, how have you weathered those tough storms? What have you had to, where have you found the strength to either rebuild or reconnect or do whatever you needed to do to get through those difficult times? Because we've all had them, whether you've been married 6 months or 60 years, whatever it's been, we've all had those moments. And so I wonder how you've weathered those things and what's been a strength to you. What has God spoken to you about during those times?
Wow, that's a big one. I know a lot of the times when Cheryl and I would sit and maybe have an argument, but we really didn't have fights, or it was mostly disagreements. And a lot of the times it's been over dumb stuff. And I don't know any particular reason why we just would go down that road, but we would. And my way of handling it was, okay, fine. I'm out of here. I'm going to my room. And I would go to my bedroom, and I would think about it. And I'd come back, and I'd look at her and say, okay, honey, I know you're right. I'm sorry. And that was pretty much the end of it. And we'd just move on to the next stage, And I think through everything, the key factor is knowing how much you love that person. Are you willing to sacrifice it for it? Because if you don't love that person that much, it's going to be sacrifice. But if you really love that person in your heart, you'll do anything for them.
Mm-hmm. Good answer.
I'd echo a lot of that, too. I wouldn't say that Jenny and I have ever had any knockdown, drag-outs. I mean, she might disagree, but...
Frying pan hurts once in a while.
Yeah. I've got a pretty thick skull, so simplify. I would say most of our arguments or disagreements are over stupid stuff. I mean, oh, you didn't do laundry, so you didn't mow the lawn, and it's usually just life No, I did this for the kids, or you didn't do that, or whatever. And it's being able to, in the moment, just walk away, because you're going to just keep talking in circles and collect your thoughts, whether that be 10 minutes or 10 days. I think that's what's worked out best for us. And that was something that was probably the hardest for, I think, both of us to get to that point, because, oh man, yeah, I'm going to really just jab it in there. I'm a beginner on this one. And of course, it doesn't do any good. It doesn't make you feel better, because then she comes back with whatever.
They don't forget.
Yeah. So I think for us, it was just being able to learn to communicate when we're not mad. We can have a disagreement and come back to it later, and just being able to walk away is probably the best thing for us, as long as we come back to it. You can't just leave it open-ended. It was always, you all right, you can have your time, but we're not done.
Sure.
And that's kept a lid on it for the most part, I think.
Sure.
Karen and I are real similar in our way we deal with conflict. We're both pretty quiet. You know, we don't necessarily yell and scream and argue. We'll have days, weeks of silence. Deafening silence. Early in our marriage, when we were first getting married, we did marriage counseling, and one of the things the pastor had us do was we had fighting rules. These are acceptable ways to argue and fight, and no name calling, and you always end the night with "I love you" and a kiss. Never leave the house mad. You don't sleep on the couch. And that's always been really wonderful. But Karen's always been good about giving me space to go back up and think about it, pray about it, not keep hammering me and making me get defensive and the walls come up. It's just a time to just calm down and process and think about it. See where I'm wrong and see, yes, dear, you're right. Which is most of the time.
So on that marriage note, you all have kids, and some of yours are older, and some of you are, and for you two on the end, are still raising younger ones. If you could say something to them about, in your marriage, you need this. Let's say besides God, because that's, dare I say, that's a given. Besides making sure that God is at the center of your marriage, what's one thing you would say, this is so important that you keep this alive, or you keep this the center of your marriage, or you focus on this in your marriage, or whatever you would say? Because, you've got, well, your girls are grown and married now, but Darren and Nick, you got young ladies that you're wondering, who's going to marry my girls? And that's a huge, I'm in that boat, and that's a huge question. And you hope you trust the guy that does. And then you've got sons that you're watching grow and getting married, and you go, I hope I taught them the right ways to take care of a woman and be a husband. So what's one thing that maybe you would say, I pray that they see this at the center of their marriage?
Love.
I
guess it's
burst
my
into a
turn.
Captain and Tennille song or something.
I don't know. This one I probably struggle with the most. Growing up, obviously, we came from a divorced family. My father is who he is. I'm not going to sit here and talk bad about it, but he wasn't necessarily the best example. And so I can look back at it now and realize what I did, the mistakes I made. I wanted that family part, so I always wanted to have a girlfriend that led to marriage, and that would complete it, and then you lose yourself trying to be that person for somebody else. So I would say, right, wrong, or indifferent, is to be fiercely independent, that you want that other person in your life, but you don't lose yourself completely, because it takes three people in a marriage. God is at the center, and then you two, as individuals, you both have your own wants, wishes, and things in your marriage. So I would say to be independent, that you know who you are. I'm not going to compromise. I want to be with you because you want to be with me, and we want to make this work. But at the end of the day, if you go down a road that I can't go down, you need to be able to walk away and back up. And I can love you from a distance, but I can't go there.
Yeah, I kind of get both sides. I've got older sons and younger daughters. My advice to my older sons is Just what the Bible says, husbands, love your wives. Give yourself up for them. And I'm ecstatic that both my boys are very good husbands, good at serving their wives or kid. They both don't have kids. They're
Not
pushing.
yet.
We've been pushing for grandkids. Come on, bring on the grandkids. For my daughters, my big advice is don't forget what a treasure you are. You are
Right.
my most precious possession. I wouldn't just give that to just anybody. Don't forget whose you are. Don't forget how precious you are.
Good answers. Yeah, I think in the journey as a pastor I get is that I get to watch these guys and their families grow and live life together. And I would say that the desires they have for their kids, they're mirroring in their marriages now. So that's always the hope, right? Because I always tell couples you're the first marriage your kids will see. So what kind of marriage do you want to show your children? And so I think when they talk about, just wanting to take care of their kids and be the defender and yet still hang on to who you are and all those qualities and to love, fiercely, those are qualities that these guys all amplify. Tell me about a dad or a grandpa, since you're all both, but somebody else, maybe a dad or grandpa that you admire and why.
I have one. Matt was one. My Uncle Matt was one. My Uncle Darren, when my dad stepped out for whatever reason, they stepped in. They didn't have to, but they all served. They set an example. They loved their wives. They came out and filled that role that wasn't there. So
Sure,
that
good.
was mine.
Good job, guys.
Well, I had actually admired my own dad and my grandfather, basically because they both, I want to say they both came from the same area of the world, Slavic and Bulgaria. And they didn't have the things that I had growing up, but they learned how to survive in another world. And they put that survival first. What I mean by surviving is they came from communist countries and they've left their families behind and everything else, and just to walk away. And my dad did go back and he did get to see part of his family and stuff, but the things that he had to endure going through all of that is just amazing. I mean, the strength that it took, the courage that it took, and most of all, just knowing that he's not alone. And it's where my grandpa comes in, is he taught me a lot of things as becoming a man, what hard work is, and I remember one day coming home from high school, because after my grandma passed away, I came up here when I was 15 to help take care of him, because I thought he needed to be taken care of. No way. Get up here on the airplane, said 2 words to me. I want to know where you're at, what time you're going to be home. And if you don't like that, get your butt back on the plane and go home. Okay. So he showed me what hard work was, because he said, we're going to build a house. And I remember digging this ditch for a sewer line. It's in rocks and gravel and everything else. He said, nope, keep digging it. Keep digging it. Don't give up. Don't give up. And I think that's one of the things that he instilled in me, is don't give up. Because there's always hope. There's always something at the end of the line.
Good.
I'd have to say that as far as a dad role model, that would have to be my brother. He's been a fantastic husband and father, and just I've always looked up to him, except for when he was beating me up as a kid. He's just my big brother. As far as a grandpa figure, I had the world's best grandpa. My grandpa dropped everything to be with us. We'd spend the summers there. We'd do everything from build mini bikes to working the farm to building explosives. I mean, he was a lot of fun. And I still got all my fingers. But
That's good.
But he was a hands-on grandpa.
Stick with that mic, Darren, and go the same way. Maybe about a husband you admire and why. Maybe it's the same guy, but just what's quality that you would say, I admire that guy as a husband because?
I have two. My brother is one. Him and his wife have really been through trouble as far as losing a child. His wife, her third run of terminal cancer.
Wow.
And just their commitment to each other. But another one was a man I met early in my Christian walk that went to West Valley. It was Don Merritt. And anybody that would meet Don would know how much he loved his wife. He had the softest hands, and he was a big guy. He would shake your hand, and he would be so happy to tell you about his girlfriend Ruthie and how much he loved her. And they were just the perfect couple.
Okay.
I don't know that I'd change my answer.
Okay.
But probably enjoyed, as a young man, watching my Uncle Darrell, just this giant person, and just be so humble with his wife, and just a good example for it. So I guess I would keep the same example that I had
Good.
before.
My brother.
Oh.
My brother was, he's a big guy, and he's always had a unique way of walking through life. Calm, he's mellow, he's totally opposite of me. I'm a firecracker. Ready to jump off the handle at any moment. My brother would stop and he would think about it before he'd do it. I remember a lot of times when we were kids growing up, we'd swing across this creek. It never failed. Every time he'd get on that thing, it'd break and he'd end up on the other side of the creek in the sting nettles. But he got up and he said, I'm okay. And he just continued on. And it's just like, and that's the way he was, and he still is. And he handles everything with a gentle touch, but a firm touch.
Cool. So as husbands, then, you all got kids, and now some of you have grandkids, and you run a business, and you work busy jobs, and you do all these things. How do you focus in and make time for just you and Karen, or you and Janine, or you and Cheryl, where you go, knowing that, from what I'm hearing from you, and knowing you like I do, that's important to you? How do you find that time, or maybe you're still working that out and you need to find that time? How does that play out in your life as a husband, where you go, I want time with just my wife? Nothing against the kids or the grandkids, but I want just time with just her. How do you do that?
Well, that's a daily chore. I think I just wait. When the right opportunity pops up, that's my moment. I have to wait to be told, okay, we got nothing going on this weekend. What are we doing? Okay. And then sometimes I try to get it done, but I fall short. And then there's times that I make up for it.
Good.
Pretty much our entire marriage, I've always worked shift work. So we get pretty jealous of our weekends. And obviously when the kids were younger, it was much more difficult because you don't get a personal life at all, ever, unless grandma and grandpa come over and steal kids from you. But now, the kids are old enough that you can leave them home for a couple, 3 hours. So, Costco dates, they're amazing, right? You just
Costco dates.
you just go there and you just enjoy each other's company, and maybe you do a little bit more perusing, but as opposed to when the kids are there, you just business, go in and you get out, because they're going to start pondering and pandering and all that other stuff. So we just try to take care of, we try to have our moments, even if they're quiet, and just, we get a weekend free of kids and we just have a stay-home date.
It's okay. Good.
Probably only been the last 3 or 4 years that Karen and I have been able to be intentional in time alone for our marriage. And our 25th anniversary, we did a trip to Hawaii, and that was a lot of fun. And so we've kind of repeated that the last few years. That's kind of one of our annual things that we both know is going to happen. We look forward to it. Then we've added Saturday night date night. We've got a great friend that kids just adore that comes and watches our girls. Matter of fact, Yana, every day that she prays, it's mommy bye-bye, daddy bye-bye, Minzy home. Get out.
That's awesome.
But our friend Minzy comes and watches the girls. We get to go have a date night, whether it's a movie or dinner or go to the gun range and shoot, which I think we're going to try and do today. But that's really important. I can't stress how important that you got to put your marriage first.
So I hear you all three saying that whether it's you just take a moment at home, or you take a moment at Costco, or you're at the gun range, or you're just doing something else, you have to set it as a priority, and it has to be intentional, and you seize that moment. Dennis Rainey's fond of saying that there will come a day when it's just you and her on the front porch. And do you want to be a tight-knit couple, or you want to be strangers? And so I admire the fact that these three keep that importance of connecting as a husband and wife alive and vital in your marriages. So at some point in your lives, obviously because you're here and the roles you do, and because of the men I know you to be, Christ came into your life. How did that happen? And what's the best thing about serving him that you found? The thing that we talked about how you connect with him the most, but how did that happen? How did you become a Christian man? And what's the biggest and best thing besides like, oh yeah, I get to go to heaven with Jesus? Besides that, I mean, what's the best thing that you found walking with him in your life?
Well, how I became a Christian man is because my mom used to take us to different churches, and she decided that she was going to leave it up to us to decide which denomination we wanted to go to. And there for a while, I was, we were going with my mom and stuff like that, and kind of understood what it was about, but then I walked away from it. Didn't really understand it. I met Cheryl, and we were married for quite a long time. I wasn't living the Christian life. Tragedy struck. And when that tragedy struck, I remembered, what Christ was all about. And he's there for us through thick and thin, no matter what. If it wasn't for Jesus Christ, we wouldn't have probably not been together, because it was a tough thing. It's usually when somebody dies, it stresses your marriage, it takes away. It's just like having a divorce. You don't get to see that person anymore. But you have to remember that through thick and thin, no matter what it is, God's always there for you, and he loves you. And he loves you so much. And I always tell my wife, I love you more than you'll ever know, because that's the way Christ loves us.
Sure.
Unconditionally, throughout more. And I love my kids the same way. And my grandkids. It's just one of those things that you have to understand, and that's just where I stand on it. It's just, he makes us who we are.
Cool.
I was raised in the Nazarene church. Probably had a little falling out there, early 20s. I think as most people do, as you're trying to figure out life. And then obviously just before I met Janine, I was like, nah, this is clearly not working, and recommitted, and just I've been blessed ever since. I think some of the greatest things is just my little bit of faithfulness. I see it triplicate on the other returns. We sold our house here a couple of years ago. We were building, and we made some good profit, but we need to turn all that into the building expenses. Well, the truck takes a expected turn for the worse, so there's $8-9 down the tube, and then it was like, oh, well, we still got a tithe, and that's a lot. I mean, that's a lot. But we prayed about it, and we said, no, this is what it is. And first part of the year, we got an unexpected. We got to move a telephone pole, and I got to buy a new pole. So there's $12,000 that's coming out of our pocket that we weren't, wasn't in the original budget for. And then we do our tax returns, and because we were faithful on this side, God said, oh, hey, it's right here. Mm-hmm. Thanks. Yeah. So it's
That's
just
cool.
And it wasn't anything that we did. We just showed our faithfulness, and God just says, okay, I'll reward your, I'll bless you. And the blessing is always more than your little bit of mustard seed of faith that you throw in there. So, I mean, when they say, if you have this much, you can move mountains, and, I believe it. So that's always the best part about it.
Cool.
I wasn't raised in the church. Wasn't until later. I remember early in my saving process, sitting and listening to the pastor preach, and I just felt so convicted that I would turn to my wife and say, what have you been telling him about? Like a spotlight right on me. And that was just fantastic to know that God knows all that stuff about me. But now, I mean, I have a God that's interested in every little detail of my life, and I can share fears with him. Something great happens, he's the first one I want to run to and say thank you. Things get hard, I've got a God I can turn to and lean on and look for guidance. If I don't know what to do, I have a God I can pray for direction. Yeah.
Good.
It's every part of all day, every day.
Good. Well, now that you're older and wiser and married more years than you were long ago, if you could look back and say something to a young Darren or Doran or Nick, either as a young man or a young husband or a young father, what's something you would say to them, you'd tell them right now if you could go back those years and say, hey, this is what you need to know? What would you tell them?
Just to be patient.
Be patient. Okay?
Well, if I was speaking to myself, I'd say, smack myself upside the head, and I'd say, you know what? Pay a little bit more attention to your family.
Okay. Okay.
I guess for me, my biggest regret was waiting so long to become a Christian. Quit screwing around, get busy.
All right. Good challenge for all of us, isn't it? If you haven't heard that yet. A couple more to wrap up today. What's one thing your children or your grandchildren would say about you? This is kind of a humbling question because you have to talk about yourself in a positive way, which is always more difficult than talking about yourself in a negative way. But if your grandkids or your kids were to describe you, and I should have asked, because I asked the ladies, I asked their sons these questions and their daughters, but if they were to say one thing about you, what would they say about you, your kids or your grandkids? They would say Darren or Doran or Nick is this.
I'm going to put somebody on the spot.
Okay.
Braylon, come up here for a second.
Oh,
I want you to answer this question the best you can.
what's one thing you would say about Grandpa that you like about him?
He's fun, and he's fun to talk to.
All right, good job. You'll take that, huh, Doran?
I'll take that.
Yeah. Nick, should we ask Sydney? No, I don't want to put her on the spot. No, she said no.
Come on, you can do it.
Jackson's downstairs. What do you think? And you could ask her later on. Would you have answered that way?
Come
Oh, she's coming up. All right, good job, Sydney.
I think he's very funny and nice and annoying, but he's a really good dad to me and my brother.
I'll take that.
You'll take that. Sold.
That'll
Bottle
reach.
that and replay it. Well, this is on Facebook and YouTube, so you can go back and replay this however many times you want to. Darren, of your umpteen kids and grandkids, well, kids at least.
Should I put Ashley on the spot and make her
All
come
right,
up?
Ashley, come on up here, Ashley. Ashley just got her driver's license and just turned 16. So now she's waiting for Dad to fix up Mom's Mustang. Ashley,
shocked
and I
she's
didn't
coming
prompt
up.
this. Doran started it. I wasn't going to do this. Good. All right, Ashley, one thing about your dad that you like or admire or you would say about him.
He's really giving. If he's had a busy day, he'll still set up a table and he'll buy me things. Or even if the people in church, if they need him, he'll help them too. And he'll help.
Good answer. All right, you'll take that too. All right, guys.
Thanks.
Sorry, that mic's so hot.
You'll get a raise in your allowance now.
Yeah. All right, one last question. If you would say to your kids, if your kids say to you or your grandkids say to you, Dad, how can we, or your wives might even ask you this question, how can we pray for you? Just that question, how can we pray for you? What would be your answer to them? This is what I need you to pray for. Maybe it's just in that instant, in that moment, or it's in general terms. How can we pray for you?
Ashley and I were talking about this in her car yesterday when we were driving, and this is a real hard question, but the only thing I would come back to is that I would hear God speak to me more clearly.
Okay.
Yeah, this is one of the more difficult ones because there's always a moment that you need to pray for this or you need to pray for that. But just in general, as a father, as a leader of our household, that your decisions are always brought before God. So that's a prayer, to be humbled, to remember your decisions affect everybody else in that household. So, being able to say, I don't know, and go to your wife, or, seek out counsel, and just, remember you're not all world, and it's okay to be wrong.
That's right.
I would have to say that my particular thing is basically that my health stays up. Because, I look at my dad's health and I see his track record and I seen where he went, and I'm like dead in line with what he's gone through. And I would just ask him to pray that my health surpasses my dad's, that I stay healthy enough to be there to watch my granddaughter get married and my youngest granddaughter to get married, and just each one of my kids to be able to spend time with me when I get really, really old. Because I remember there was a time when this young lady up here that came up, when I lost my job, if it wasn't for her laying on my arm when I would have my hands behind my back, I might have given up. But she used to lay there and she would fall asleep there, and she used to do the same thing that I did. And it just brought a big joy. And then listening to my grandson call me Papa all the time, and those are the big things that you look forward to.
Sure. Well, I just have to tell you, these guys are integral parts of our church family. You all are, but certainly the journey we get to take with these three this morning has been a blessing. I admire their humility. I admire their openness. It's not always an easy thing to sit up here in front of 100 or so people and say, this is where I've messed up, or this is where I've struggled, or this is what I need, or just to openly say positive things in public about the people you care the most about. It's just still sometimes tough, and I just really admire them. I admire the humility that all three have, but yet also the confidence they have as husbands and dads. I see it in them, whether they question that confidence or not. I see it in them, and I admire it in all three of them, and I'm grateful for the way they serve this church, and they serve you, and they serve our community, and whether they're behind a desk selling parts, or they're making deliveries in an orchard, or they're chasing bad guys with the dog down the street, they are our church family in our community. They are Jesus in the community, and I love that they get to share him. I know that if I was to go in to Power Motion and just start talking to Darren and Doran, likely we're going to have a prayer meeting right there at the counter. Or if I was to ride in Nick's car, probably going to be some Christian music on, or we're going to be talking about Jesus, or I think it's cool how he talks about that he gets to share grace with people that maybe don't expect it. That's a cool thing that you don't always expect from a police officer, because we have these impressions of them. So good job to you guys. Thank you for sharing your hearts. Thank you for your journey as men, as husbands, as grandpas, as dads, as leaders in our church. God is still using you and still wants to use you in all of those roles, in all of those ways. And I am confident that as you let him, there's nothing he can't do with you. So let's pray today. God, we're just grateful for the way you've spoken through these men today. Thank you for the families you've blessed them with. Thank you for the roles that you've blessed them with as husbands, as fathers, as grandpas, as dads, as leaders, as servants, as people in the community where they are lighthouses for Jesus, wherever they go, whatever they do. Even if they don't vocally utter your words, God, they are still shining your spirit through their lives. I thank you for the wives you've given them that are strengths to them. If I asked them again, I know they would say they are so blessed by Janine and Cheryl and Karen as being the best part of their lives. Thank you for the gifts of our wives to these men. God, I just pray you bless them for their sharing. I pray that maybe today someone has heard a word from one of them that has encouraged them or has said, I want to be more like that, or I need God in my life that way. God, these stories we tell are testimonies to you, and we're grateful that you are an integral part of their lives and that they bring you into our lives. Thanks for being with us this morning, God. We pray that as we've shared just quietly today about your goodness in our lives, you've been blessed by that. In Jesus' name, amen.